Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 3 SSRs as part of the Oshi collaboration between Ruby, Kana, and Memcho. Keep in mind that all 3 of these cards are technically limited. As per the news in-game, Ruby and Kana may have the opportunity of coming back alongside Memcho if another Oshi collaboration happens. Otherwise, these cards will be removed from the pool once the event is over after the first week of August. So you still have some time to try to get some copies of these characters. Generally speaking, I would recommend to only aim for 1 copy, then move on to the other banner if you don't have the other. Then maybe consider searching for more copies if you still have a lot of gems left over. There are ways to raise them up without getting dupes if you're just new to the game, so you don't have to go all the way in to get these copies and still be able to upgrade them to their max potential even when the event is over. So, with that said, let's talk about Ruby. The first of the 3 cards introduced in the collaboration, Ruby arrives as the dance representative, meaning that her main focus is in the dance attribute. Ruby's appeals have the ability to attack all judges at once, and also grants a boost to your dance stat once she appeals for a few turns. She also grants teams a use of a mulligan or a discard of 1 extra appeal after appealing. This coincides with both of her appeals having an effect known as a change appeal, meaning that a bonus is granted if this appeal is discarded. In this case, Ruby's is a separate dance buff for a few turns, different from the one that you get from her appeal. Generally speaking, Ruby is okay. At first glance, she's a very standard limited unit in terms of kit design, and might even be a little lacking depending on who you ask. She feels like a card that maybe was probably slated for last year, if I were to give you a relative time frame as to what kind of power level she feels like. The real fascinating discovery is how good change appeal effects like this are good for Straylight, which is quickly retooling how players build Straylight specifically. She's certainly worth considering for the novelty of the collaboration itself, or the practicality of free active buffs in a Dance Straylight setup. Her roles are center, maybe. She has access to attack all appeals, she's a buffer, and she has access to change appeal. As for whether or not you should pull for her, I would say a moderate to high recommendation. I think this card is still very solid, all things considered, and has some really interesting applications going forward, while not being too underpowered to feel underwhelming in the face of stronger team. First things first, Ruby's initial skill is a dance 3.5 appeal to all judges that raises your dance by 30% for 5 turns, and grants +1 to your mulligan use for the rest of Fest. Her change appeal, upon being discarded, is a dance 30% up for 2 turns. The max version of her appeal is a dance 4.5 to all judges that raises your dance by 50% for 5 turns, and again, applies +1 to your discard use for the rest of Fest. The change appeal, upon being discarded, is a dance 30% up for 2 turns. Her memory appeal, when maxed out, is a dance 3.0 appeal. Because she doesn't have access to a plus appeal or link appeal, this means this is as strong as all of her appeals and memory appeal get. For her passives, at 1 star, Ruby unlocks a dance 56% up passive that requires 1 or more active dance up buffs. This means that by using either of her appeals, this is automatically met, meaning that the following turn has a pretty good chance of activating this passive, which it has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a dance 100% up that requires 1 or more active attention up buffs. This has a 30% chance to activate twice. This also unlocks a dance +50 uncap, being able to raise your dance an extra 50 points higher than normal. Her 3-star unlock is a dance +150 uncap, and her 4-star passive is a dance 158% up that has a relatively strict requirement. Your current mental needs to be below 64%, but above 35%. So, anywhere in that range will let this passive be available. It has a 30% chance to activate twice, and this also unlocks a dance +100 uncap. For the support recommendations, this first one is a bit expensive, featuring 4 limited SSRs and a Twicolate SSR. This utilizes the Alstroemeria cards' combined support masteries and passives to achieve total victory in Fest, alongside other powerful options like Kogane, who is a meta staple, Asahi, who has been very good for dance teams going forward, and Toru, who is just a generically good dance support with some okay passives, but really the masteries are what make her feel pretty usable. On the other side of things, we have a cheaper assortment of permanent supports who have reasonable use in dance teams even today, thanks to their masteries or passives to keep them going. Madoka is still a very coveted permanent SSR for most dance teams alongside the Sakuya and Amana. Mamimi has still a very solid 2-star passive for most teams, while Asahi is a good assortment of balanced passives alongside a good assortment of masteries. As always, consider your best options available and adjust accordingly. If you have some of these pieces, you can feel free to mix and match them to see what works best for you. So, overall, Ruby as a center gets a B-. Ruby's memory appeal is simply a low number and nothing else. Because she doesn't have access to link appeals, it means it scores less and does less than the usual memory appeal. This doesn't make it totally unplayable, but certainly drops the value of this memory appeal down a fair bit. If you have no real decision made towards your center, you could certainly pick worse memory appeals than this one to use. As a unit, Ruby earns anywhere from what... As a unit, I would say Ruby earns anywhere from a B+ to an S. Again, Ruby in a vacuum is not an inherently insane card. She provides very generic AoE appeals without downsides and happens to grant you a free mulligan use after appealing. The big advantage she provides to active buff teams like Straylight will make her a popular tech pick for the foreseeable future, until other cards catch up to this specific level of utility. She's interesting, if not just a bit tame, for her overall design. Next up we then have Kana. The second of the collaboration cards and the last of the producible cards, Kana is a pure vocal unit who holds back against judges initially to make a huge showing later. Unlike Ruby, Kana's appeals only target a single judge, applying a debuff known as interest to them for a set amount of time. This specific buff makes it so that judges will take more damage, but Kana will always go last in the turn order, so that when she does appeal, they take the damage, receive the debuff, then on the following turn, you'll be able to use that effect, while none of the rivals have been able to yet, because you appealed last. Kana, in a handful of ways, is a lot more useful than Ruby in a general sense. The ability to raise a judge's interest goes a long way in securing high scores, and has practical applications in a variety. The ability to raise a judge's interest goes a long way in securing high scores, and has practical application in a variety of game modes. Furthermore, because of her access to change appeals like Ruby, she provides vocal Straylight additional sources of mulligans or vocal up buffs to make their appeals more effective and their game plan a bit more consistent. Her roles are center, maybe, a buffer, has access to slow appeals, and change appeal. I would moderately to highly recommend pulling for this Kana, maybe leaning a little more towards highly recommended, just because, again, the utility of this card heavily outweighs what Ruby is able to provide for most teams, and thus makes Ruby a little less enticing of a card compared to Kana. Kana's initial skill is a slow vocal 3.8 appeal that applies a judge interest buff of 50% up for 2 turns, and grants that +1 to mulligan use for the rest of Fess. The change appeal upon being discarded is a vocal 30% buff for 2 turns. The max version of this skill is a slow vocal 5.0 appeal that raises the judge's interest by 100% for 2 turns, and grants +1 to your mulligan use for the rest of Fess. The change appeal is the same as before, a vocal 30% up for 2 turns when discarded, and her memory appeal, just like Ruby's when maxed out, is a vocal 3.0 appeal. Kana's 1-star passive is a vocal 60% up if you have 1 or more active vocal up buffs. This has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a vocal 97% up that requires the turn count to be 1 or earlier, so quite literally a turn 1 passive only, that has a 50% chance to activate once. This also grants an additional +50 vocal uncap. Her 3-star unlock is a vocal +150 uncap, and her 4-star passive is a vocal 150% up if the turn count is 4 or later. This has a 10% chance to activate twice, and this unlocks an additional vocal +100 uncap. For the support recommendations, once again we start with the expensive setup featuring 3 Twicolate vocal supports alongside 2 limited vocal supports. This expensive setup plays mostly off the synergy between vocal Shi's supports, as well as the small synergies between the 2 Antika supports of Kogane and Mamimi. Combining this with the masteries provided by these other cards, this will yield a unit with incredibly effective passives on a team like Shi's with 4 or more different units, being able to utilize specifically the Mikoto support's high power 4-star passive, while still being able to synergize with all the other cards that you're running alongside her. The more reasonable permanent setup features cards like Kaho, Chiyoko, Asahi, Fuyuko, and Luka. Again, feel free to mix and match pieces from the above setup depending on what you have available. This one runs off the combined masteries of Straylight and Luka, alongside some very solid Hokura passives in order to make a relatively competent card for your vocal team. As a center, Kana earns a B-. It's the exact same memory appeal as Ruby's, but now it's vocal. It has all the same weaknesses, but at least it has some amount of damage to it, so it's not the worst memory appeal to have. As a unit, Kana earns an A+ to an S+. Kana somehow came out of the collaboration being the arguably better unit of the two. Being able to lower the defenses of a judge in order to decimate them the following turn, while avoiding your rivals taking advantage of this, is hard to understate. And just like Ruby, her change appeal is a surprisingly powerful addition for Vocal Straylight, and Interest Up has a great amount of applications for many modes, such as Match Live because her damage values are already high, being a single target, or even Collabo Fest where Interest Up is king in basically every stage of the game. She is certainly a great unit to keep around or pull for if you haven't already. Finally, we'll wrap things up with the event SSR support card, Memcho. Last in the lineup is Memcho, a visual support with an emphasis on attention raising. Simply put, this card is not very good. Though this isn't exactly a surprise given the quality of event SSRs in Shiny. It's rare to see one that actively does something particularly amazing. That isn't to say Memcho doesn't have positives. Her 4-star appeal raises your attention by 200% for 3 turns, the most attention necessary to make attention scaling appeals deal the max amount of damage. There is some level of application that you can make for that depending on the type of team you're building. We'll get into some other positives too. But first, her support skills. Idol's Bond, Promise Recovery, and Rest Boost are very standard, and her 2 unique support skills are Visual Mastery Visual, reaching +8 at level 75, otherwise +6 at level 55, and Stamina Support, reaching +4 at level 80, +3 at level 65, or +2 at level 40. Her TFD idea is visual, and her insight and landing point is towards visual. Memcho's 0-star passive is a visual 18% up that requires your current mental to be 75% or higher, which has an 18% chance to activate once. Her 1-star passive is a visual 25% up if you're in the visual position, and it has a 25% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a visual 60% up and attention 25% up that requires 1 or more active attention up buffs. This also has a 25% chance to activate once. Her 3-star uncap is a visual +50, and her 4-star appeal is a visual 3.5 that raises your attention by 200% for 3 turns. Her event passive is a visual 30%. Her event passive is a visual 30% up if your current mental is 74% or lower, and has a 50% chance to activate twice. Memcho earns a C+. Memcho is not a particularly good support, but has some highlights to make her not completely unusable. Her 2-star passive is somewhat reasonable, and is easy to activate with her 4-star appeal, which can also have niche use in attention scaling teams like Hokura, for example. Outside of this, she's not really a card you need to invest into heavily. I would recommend just picking up the copies as you go if you're participating in the event, and you might as well farm for her while she's here. That will do it for the video today. Thank you so much as always for watching, and thank you for your patience as this video surprisingly did take a little bit. This month has been extremely busy for me on a personal level, and it hasn't stopped being busy, so I had to figure out when I was going to get a good opportunity to record this. Hopefully you've been enjoying the Oshinoko collaboration, and if you've just started because of the collaboration, welcome to Shiny Colors, enjoy your stay. Next time we'll be talking about whatever banner comes next. We know that the next support is going to be Fuyuko, and considering that it's the start of the month, technically, it's probably limited. So we'll have to see who the Produce SSR is alongside this new Fuyuko card. So let's look forward to it together. Till then, I've been Sho. Have a wonderful rest of your day.